My dad used to say I would go in his closet and throw on like his suits or whatever and go around town like I owned the place. I just expected it. I had clarity on where I wanted to be and was willing to do whatever.
Imagine having direct access to someone who's navigated life's toughest terrains and come out stronger. Someone who's been there, done that, and can guide you with empathy, experience, and honesty. This isn't just advice. It's a lifeline, a strategy session, a chance to learn from my journey so you can accelerate yours. Without the ability to be self-aware and introspective, the ability for you to get to where you want to go, nearly impossible. Hey everybody, welcome back to the David Guttman podcast. I have a really special guest today. As you know, the focus of my podcast is interviewing hyper-successful people that have a good moral compass. My belief is that people that can find a way to be successful and not sell their soul to get there have a unique perspective on the path of life that people can really benefit from. Mentorship's always been a significant focus in my life, in large part because I didn't have really good mentors, especially like holistic ones. It's a person that takes the road less traveled that often has a lot more to offer others as they navigate their lives and their professional careers. Today I'm speaking with Patrick Carroll, a self-made, I think half billionaire, I think that's the right way to say it maybe, that without even going to college became a residential real estate mogul who at one point owned or controlled over 100,000 residential units. Patrick was born in Richmond, Virginia and grew up in Tampa, Florida before moving to Atlanta to begin building his real estate empire. By taking a disciplined approach to investments, he's done over $12 billion in acquisitions and almost $9 billion in dispositions. In 2023, he has sold his real estate company, Carroll Org, for $80 million in cash. He's been a generous philanthropist, serving on the boards of the Jesuit High School Foundation and the Boys and Girls Club of Chicago, as well as being a major benefactor to Care for Special Children and the Heart Fund. With that backdrop, it's my sincere pleasure to welcome Patrick Carroll.
Thank you.
Really, really excited to have you. Like I was saying, to me, it's the people that take the less traditional career path that I think there's a lot more opportunity to learn from.
Yeah.
So I thought it might be useful just to sort of start with a little bit of your background. Like growing up, what did your folks do?
My folks were actually clothing reps. Well, my dad was. So, he would represent clothing companies throughout the state of Florida. So he would, this was back before Amazon and things like that. So he'd go to boutiques and represent clothing companies. And yeah, that's what he did. He was a traveling salesman.
And so obviously, with the success you've had, clearly sales is in your blood. Do you think you learned some of that from your dad? Like, did you actually see him doing it, or was that something that just came natural to you?
I'd say a little of both. I was kind of like the class clown, I'd say, growing up. So I think I just, enjoyed kind of entertaining in a way. So I definitely think that helped with sales. I kind of learned early to think quick on my feet. So I think that too.
So were you a good student?
I was not. I think I would take my books at the beginning of the year and stick them in the locker and really not pull them out.
Why was that? Was that just education wasn't, kind of in the family blood, or?
It was just not interesting to me. And I was the type of guy that could, look through the information a night before and get through on a test. But really, I was just focused on, I played basketball. I love that. And, that was my focus, that and having fun.
And any siblings?
I have a twin brother.
Okay, identical twin or fraternal?
Fraternal. I'm like 6'4", he's like 5'8". So yeah, he hates that. But yeah, that's I have a twin brother, and that's it.
Okay, and so played basketball. Did you have any coaches that were really impactful to you?
I did. A coach named Ron Laker, he was awesome. He used to get in there, and I remember play with me. He was a college athlete, and but he was just great. I'd actually say he was a mentor type. I still see him every once in a while when I go back to Tampa. So he was great. I had other coaches that were, at the Boys and Girls Club. I played AAU ball there that were great. So yeah, I'd say I've been really fortunate with great coaches and great mentors.
I'm guessing because basketball was important to you. Did you ever think about it? And I know you didn't go to college, but did you ever think about playing college ball? Was that something that was of interest to you? And how did that work out?
Yeah, it really was. And I think that's probably a reason I didn't go to college because I didn't really get traction like I would have thought. And so, just that was kind of one of the things that deterred me. Probably if I had gone, if I had the the opportunity to go play ball in college, I probably would have gone. But, I think I delayed the process. I delayed it taking SATs. I don't even know if I ever did.
Right.
And it just wasn't in the cards for me. I used to watch, my mentor and other guys in town, and they were the successful business guys, and that's who I wanted to be. Early on, I could just see myself being one of those guys, driving the big Mercedes, hanging out at the golf course, even though I don't play golf now. But, the successful business guys in town, that's who I wanted to be. That's kind of who I buddied up with.
So, to be as successful as you've been, never even going to college is very unusual. Help me understand kind of how you thought that through. Meaning, not I did A and I flipped this house and then I did this. More like the psychology is what I'm really interested in. Help me understand that psychology. How did you think you were going to be able to pull it off?
It's funny. I look back on that a lot now because, having sold my business and having sold a lot of the real estate I bought, I'm 45 years old and I'm kind of looking for the next chapter in my life. And I think just, being so young and really having nothing to lose, I think helped. And then just really seeing myself as being successful. I don't think I ever doubted it. And so taking risk early on, like I bought several companies pretty much early on, getting early loans and things like that I have had no ability, no qualifications to get. I feel like I just, visualized it and really kind of expected it. And so I think I just expected it,
Where did that confidence come from? Was it your parents that ingrained that in you? Was it just born that way?
I think born that way. I mean, I was the kid in high school that had the fake ID that would walk in and sit at a bar like I was fine to do it. My friends used to laugh their ass off. They were like, Pat's going to happy hour like he's, like he owns this place. And my dad used to say, I would go in his closet and throw on like his suits or whatever and go around town like I owned the place. And so I think, again, I just expected it. I had clarity on where I wanted to be and was willing to do whatever. And, I think for some reason, the right doors just opened for me. I got the opportunity early on to, finance these deals 100%. And then, when the market crashed in 08, 09, I was fortunate enough not to get wiped out. And so I think just, I didn't have anyone telling me it was crazy. I grew up in Tampa and, moved to Atlanta without any real friends or anything like that. So I didn't really have anyone saying, what do you mean you're going to do this? What do you mean you're going to do that? Like I was siloed in and just kind of, expected it.
Well, why'd you pick Atlanta?
It was the New York of the South.
Okay.
And I'd gone up there a few times with my dad because he was in the clothing business, and they had clothing shows up there. And frankly, I wanted to move up there, like I said, because it was like the big city. You were mentioning Chicago.
Yeah.
Like, well, if you grow up in Florida, unless you go to New York, Atlanta's a big town. And so, I got a 100% mortgage to buy a condo up there. And I went in and told my parents I was moving to Atlanta, and they're like, "What?" That was how I ended up there.
How old were you when you bought your first property?
20 years old.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, so I remember an interview I was watching of yours. You were talking about how you're like, you just bombard people with questions,
Yeah.
right, as a way to learn. Maybe do you use that as a technique? I'm curious, and maybe what could some people learn from that?
I think, I use it as a technique. I think unintentionally. I think early on, I would go and just, hound, successful business guys. I mean, my mentor, one of my biggest mentors was a guy named Tom Shannon. He owned a shopping center where my dad early on had a clothing store. And so he said I would go in there and, steal Coca-Colas from my dad's store and walk around the block and sell them. But I used to just pepper these guys with questions. So I think it was a way for me to learn. I was reading any book I could get my hand on, but when I really got time one-on-one with these guys, it was like a shortcut. I'd go right to the point. How'd you finance this? How'd you do this? How'd you do that? And even now, I think, I ask a lot of questions. And, if I'm getting pitched on a deal, like I take a lot of calls and a lot of meetings on deals that I know 100% I'm not going to do. And I do it just for the educational purpose. So I think, I don't know if I heard it early on or if I just started to do it naturally. Somebody always told me you have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason.
Right. Now, you said that you really like to read, even though maybe, school wasn't your thing.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite book?
I love Rockefeller's book, Titan. I think Rockefeller is obviously the best businessman ever. But really any business book. I mean, Good to Great, all these things, Built to Last. I've read just about every biography. I mean, my problem now is I've run out of new books to read.
Right.
But I've read books on psychology, self-help books, just about everything. But biographies are by far my favorite.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth between Elon Musk's biography and Steve Jobs. It was really I've probably read those, and it was interesting how bad Steve Jobs' business acumen was his first go around. Second time, I think he was amazing. Yeah. But in the beginning, he made some colossal mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, Elon's book is crazy. It's amazing, right?
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, if you look at what this guy's done, and I'm lucky enough to be an investor in SpaceX.
Oh, nice.
I mean, it's incredible. And, and what he, the courage it took, for him just to plow back, he'd make a ton, plow back in, make a ton, plow back in. I mean, even me right now, I'm like, oh God, I don't want to lose what I've made.
Right.
This guy had no fear.
Seems like he really doesn't have any fear. I think he just thinks like you could take everything he had, and in 5 years he'd be a billionaire again. You know what I'm saying?
And he probably would. I mean, the ability he has to create scale and things like that, and just
I don't think there's ever been an entrepreneur like him. I mean, to be able to create $1 billion company in one industry, what is he, $1 billion companies in 5 or 6 different industries?
Right.
No one's ever done that, even in like 2.
And he runs them.
I know.
It's another thing to I think Thomas Edison and things like that, there was inventors out there, right? They come up with an idea. This guy is not only an inventor, he's an operator, which is really, I don't think we've ever had someone like him.
Yeah, and he'll just do Doge in his spare time, right?
Right.
It's just unbelievable. I remember I was watching one of your interviews, and you were talking about how maybe not doing things the way they're normally done. So, like, when people are going to renovate a property, they clear it out.
Yeah.
They wipe out all their income, and then they renovate it, and then they get occupancy again. You obviously don't do that. Which when you said it, I'm like, duh, that makes so much sense.
Right.
But why do you think you see things differently than other people?
I think because if you're going to be successful, you have to do things differently, or you're just the same, right? So I would have to, and I apply a lot of common sense, just like you said, people I think have the herd mentality, where if somebody's doing it, we should all do it. Or if somebody had a little bit of success, we should all do it. And I knew early on, because I didn't go to these big colleges, I didn't have, 10 years of experience before I was trying to do deals. I had to do something to stand out. So, your example of when I wouldn't clear out apartments, I would keep that income stream. It was my value proposition. Hey, you're going to continue to get cash flow. We're going to continue to, hit our preferred returns, things like that, even while we're doing renovations. And it was something that made sense. Another thing is people would go in and spend all this money doing renovations. And I can think of a couple of my competitors specifically. I won't mention them, but I didn't. I wanted to keep the expenses down. If we were getting rent growth, like these markets, the Sunbelt markets, were getting tremendous rent growth. And I figured if we didn't have to swing a hammer and renovate, why do it? Just because you have the money to do it doesn't mean you should. So I was focused more on keeping expenses down, really operating more efficiently. I think people fall in love sometimes with building things. I mean, you can drive around town right now and people, I think, want to say, okay, I built that. I was more focused on making money.
Right. It struck me from listening to some of your stories that, I think you said you were reached out to billionaires that you didn't even know just to network.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Just hey, why not?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like going and going up to the most beautiful girl at the bar.
Right.
It's like,
Don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, hey, why not? And I kind of just thought they would say yes. Again, it's so funny. I'm 45 now. I look back and I'm like, how did I do this? What did give me the, I'll tell you though, a lot of people reach out to me, and there's probably 3 or 4 calls I'll take a week where it's some early 20s, up and coming guy that just reaches out to me on Instagram or social media and says, hey, Mr. Carroll, can I pick your brain? And I always say yes. I don't say yes to everyone, but, if I get to them, I'll say yes. And I think it's hard, it's hard to say no because you were that person.
Right.
And so I think that's what some of these guys figured. And, I just always thought if I approached somebody with humility and, and I tried to be a value add, I tried to, I'd be going up to New York and be calling these guys, and I would make sure I had all the information on all these markets that they may consider. And, I'd try to, give them free knowledge. Hey, look, I'm on the ground down there. I'm seeing this and that. I'm seeing rent growth here. I'm seeing opportunity here. And so while I'd pick their brain, I'd also try to, return the favor a little bit.
I remember when my daughter was in college, and her and most of her friends were all struggling to find their first job out of college, and I told her, I kind of told her to do the same thing. I call it an informational interview. I said, I've said, look, here are 50 companies in the Denver area. They're in the Inc. 500, so they're fast growth because that's where the most opportunity is going to be. I said, I sent her the list. There were industries that she had at least some mild interest in. And I just said, only contact the C-level executives. Say, can I buy you coffee? Can I buy you lunch? And just ask for their advice. Don't ask them for a job. Just ask for their advice. She got 2 job offers and a mentor out of it.
No, it's awesome.
So, and like you said, she had an 80% hit rate, and she would every other day she's texting me, Podge, another CMO said he'd have lunch with me.
Yeah.
And she was shocked.
Yeah. It's hunger is it's the best, I'm attracted to it, right? Being, these young, hungry entrepreneurs or, up and coming people, you can sense it. They're ready to run through walls. Yeah. And, I think there's a saying, I'd rather have, young, hungry, and broke,
right,
than whatever. And it's true. And that's when I was building my business in Atlanta, we had all these young analysts, and they came out of, southeastern, colleges, University of Georgia, University of Alabama, et cetera. And within 2 weeks, you could teach these kids to underwrite the deals the way you wanted.
Right. And
they would work their ass off. And it was just, they were hungry. They wanted to succeed. They wanted that. And they had lack of fear. I think that's what you get with earlier, younger people. And so I think that's what keeps, that's what keeps a business growing, that energy. And yeah, you need, kind of seasoned executives, but I think you also need these younger people, crawling up your back, breathing down your neck to keep you motivated.
Well, like you said, we were those guys at one point, and someone helped us out.
For sure.
You can't help but want to pay it forward a little bit.
For sure. And it's funny, when I bought 3 companies, I was probably 27 years old. So I was standing up, I remember suit and tie, and I'd stand up in front of these employees, and they must have think who the hell is this kid?
Right.
But it was, I think, because of that, I was so driven. I worked 7 days a week. I wanted to earn their respect. And I think that's what a lot of these kids do. You know, and they're smart as hell. You know, they're more tech savvy. They're learning new things. They came up, you know, exposed to technology. So, you know, it's interesting. They bring a different skill set.
You know, one of the other things I saw you say was that you don't like to over negotiate deals, and that's actually unusual in my experience for the people that are more successful. Usually, the more successful they are, they're kind of assholes, and they kind of sort of, you know, play their, you know, overplay their hand. Maybe they're not overplaying it, but I think that they don't realize that life is a multi-stage negotiation, even if it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about that a little bit, because I think people make that mistake a lot. They think they have to get the absolute best deal, and that sometimes actually works against you.
It totally does. It's funny. I hate to negotiate. I don't like it. Like it's like arguing. Like I'd rather not. But I read earlier, you know, early on, Harry Hemsley, who was like the biggest owner of real estate back in the 60s or 70s in New York City. And, you know, somebody asked him, Mr. Hemsley, how did you become so wealthy? And he said, by overpaying for everything. And, you know, it's funny, like, you know, early on too, like, and even now, like you have, if there was a deal down the street that went up for sale, you'd have 30 qualified buyers that show up to buy it, you know? And, you know, if the guys, you know, are over haggling, shit like that, people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and also if it's a good deal, you're not going to look back and go, God, if I had got this for 5% less, you know, it'd be a great deal. No, it's either going to be a great deal or not. You're not going to get by on a margin. And so, and I think lastly, instinct. You know, I know within a nanosecond if I'm going to do it or not. And so, you know, I just, as far back as I can remember, I'll say yes on the spot or no on the spot. And so, but I think those are all things. But yeah, sellers don't want to over negotiate, especially when they have options. And if it's a great asset, whether it's a company or property, they've got options, you know, and they'll tell you to pound sand really quick.
Yeah, I think they're always trying to get, people do it with salaries all the time. And I have, I don't know if you said you read some stuff on psychology. Robert Cialdini wrote a book called Influence, another one called Persuasion. And I was watching this thing he was doing, and he was saying that he called it his equity theory. He said if you hire someone that thinks he should make $40 an hour, and you'll hire him at $20 an hour, he'll do one of two things. He'll either work half the time or steal $20 an hour.
100%.
You know, but it's like, you know, you're not getting the deal you think you're getting. And my experience is when someone wants 20 an hour and you pay him 22 an hour, that extra $2 gets you way more than the 10% extra you paid.
It's really true. And just like I was also told, and I've experienced it, you can't really demote people.
Right, no.
Because they'll just have a chip on their shoulder. Yeah, they've got one foot out the door. You know, but what I did is I never really like if market was $200,000 for an employee, I'd pay him probably $200,000, but I wouldn't do much more, but I'd give them upside. You know, I would try to beat market on bonuses, try to meet, you know, I even set up at the end of the kind of run we had is a pool where I allowed employees to invest in the deals. Oh. You know, and sometimes I'd even finance it for them. And so I think, you know, I call it ownership mentality. And yeah, if you're just, you know, if you feel like you got beat to death on, you know, comp and things like that, it's just not a great way to get the most out of people.
Well, the ownership mentality thing is interesting. You say that. So my first job out of college, I worked for Anderson Consulting, but I hated it. I was there for like 1 year. Then I went to another systems integrator, and I didn't know what a stock option was, but I got 7 of them. And then we IPO'd, and it split 125 to 1, and I was worth $300,000 on paper, and I was 24. And I was like, I like this equity thing. And so I swore from then I would never work somewhere without equity. And every place where I've had the say, I made sure every employee has equity, even if it's a small amount. Because again, you want people to act like owners, you got to make them owners.
Yeah. Yep.
So and you get way more than what it cost you. Maybe talk a little bit about, you've obviously had a lot of successes. What's been your biggest loss? Your biggest L? And maybe leave the marriage aside.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that's probably bad. I think, I think it's missing out on opportunity, to be honest with you. I mean, I look back on it and I was aggressive. I mean, no doubt. But, some of the biggest, losses are the good deals you miss. And so, that's why I move aggressively, when a good opportunity comes. And, I think also losing really good employees. So, I felt like my job mainly was raising capital, kind of being the cheerleader, right? Telling our story, marketing our company, things like that. But then also making sure the key employees were really happy.
Right.
And I lost some key employees, and it really is a setback. I mean, it's, between the time it takes to replace them and just, that the value they really add. So I think it's keeping out in front of your superstars, keeping them happy, and probably overpaying them. What else? I mean, I'm sure I made a ton of mistakes. I was pretty fortunate in the fact that the real estate market just ripped in a good way. So it's easy to look good. But yeah, I think, I think maybe getting a little too conservative a little early. I was always one that took chips off the table. So, I used to say that people used to say, "What's your goal?" And I'd say, put as much distance between myself and broke as possible. And so I think, instead of heavily reinvesting, I was taking cash off the table. So I think, maybe if I had expanded the business more, reinvested the business more, I could have grown it and scaled it. But right now, it's a bad time. So, I kind of feel glad I didn't.
Right.
But I think just when an opportunity comes along, consider it a pitch right across the plate and take a swing.
Now, when you do make those mistakes, whether it's losing talent or deal that maybe you should have done, do you recalibrate? Do you use that as an opportunity to recalibrate, or maybe you're like, you know what, because you can make an argument like whether you make 200 million or 300 million or 500 million, it's a lot of money, right? Probably don't need to work if you don't want to. So maybe there wasn't a mistake. I don't know. How do you think about it? How do you think about risk?
I think about risk a little differently now. But yeah, I recalibrate. I think that's what, mistakes are for, to really teach you what to pay attention to going forward. It's easy to get complacent when everything's great. When you get hit in the face with something, it really causes you to pay attention and say, do I want to get hit in the face again, or do I want to readjust? And, how it affects me, I guess, now with the risk is, I'm less in a hurry, and more, I'd say, strategic and methodical. I think earlier on, it was, this is either going to work or it's not. If it's not, screw it. Now it's like, okay, I've had some success, and, you got to play offense and defense at the same time.
So you've obviously also had a lot of wins. Do you think you learned stuff from your wins, or is it hard to tell whether, you were lucky or good?
I think you got to be lucky and good. You can be the best real estate investor in the world. If interest rates are where they are now, it's tough to make things happen. When I was really active, interest rates were 1% and things like that. And so it was easy to look good. So I think you have to have luck, but you also have to be prepared and work your ass off when that door opens. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, you can be the best athlete in the world, but if you're consistently on the worst team, it's impossible, right? You have to have a little bit of luck. Tom Brady ended up on the Patriots, right? Like, you have to have a little bit of luck on your side to, I think, have that top level of success.
So, how old were you when you got married?
31,
31. And how old were you when you had kids?
probably 33.
And looking back on it, like, how do you think about marriage and children, and have your views changed at all? And maybe you've got 3 sons. What advice would you give them about marriage and children?
Don't rush it. For sure, don't rush it. And have, get married with somebody that has similar goals, right? Like, if you're going to run 100 miles an hour from 30 to 65, make sure that person knows that and really understands that. And make sure they're not trying to run to 35 or to 40. And, and make sure you have similar goals. My goals are not just financial. My goals are passion, competition. And, I believe we only live once. So, I want to leave it all on the field, so to speak. And I think that'd be my advice to my sons too. Like, find something that you're passionate about, because money will only motivate you for so long. Especially them, they're members of the Lucky Sperm Club, and so they're going to have to find something that gets them out of bed in the morning and gets them, I used to say, wake up in a 3-point stance and, get excited, get something that drives passion. But that's the thing, you have to have somebody, I think, one that has your back, and understands that you're going to run hard and you're going to run into walls occasionally and things like that. And if you didn't, you wouldn't be competitive, right?
Yeah.
Like if you were just, going the speed limit,
Yeah.
you just kind of blend in. So I think you have to have that person that understands that to have that, level of success, you're probably cut a little different than most people,
Right.
and gets that.
Yeah, I definitely, so I remarried.
Yeah.
And definitely picked better the second time. And honestly, it was just like you were saying, like, I might be working really late, and oh, you said said I'd be home at 7, now it's 9. Instead of busting my balls,
Yeah.
she's like, should I send some Uber Eats for you? Do you want me to bring some food by? Like, never bust my balls about anything, because she gets to live a great lifestyle because, I work my ass off.
Yeah, no busting the balls is a key is a key thing for me, and it's true. Like, I think, fortunately or unfortunately, you kind of get it right the second time better. Because it's like, I think you hit your stride probably in your late 30s, and you really adapt. I think, as a man, to what you want, and whether you're going to settle into kind of running at a certain pace, or whether you're going to keep it full throttle.
So when I went to college, it was the first time I was around a lot of people that, had just a ton of money, 50, 100, $200 million, back when that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen that before. And it was interesting. The kids all fell into one of two camps. I would say it was like 80% of the kids were lazy as hell, and they were never going to amount to anything. And the other 20% almost had a chip on their shoulder. They've been working in the family business since they were 4, like working on the assembly line, whatever the business was. And they were going to, whatever they were given, they were going to triple it, quadruple it. And that's just how they were wired. Having 3, and I think it's even more important with a son than it might be with a daughter in that respect. Having 3 boys, how do you think about that?
It's funny, like my sons, from an early age, I used to take them around to the properties. We had a thing called Guys Day on Saturday. So we'd drive around to the properties and things like that. And even, recently, they just assume they're going to come work with me. They're excited about it. And so, but I have a lot of friends that are second generation wealth, and they have chips on their shoulder. They have something to prove. It's almost like they're embarrassed.
Right.
And so I think that's a good thing. I think anything that motivates you to do a little extra, go. Me, I was always kind of embarrassed. I always kind of was embarrassed I didn't go to college. I didn't want to be seen as not being as intelligent or something like that. So I did have a chip on my shoulder.
Right.
I'd go up to these conference rooms, and all these, private equity guys had gone to Harvard, Wharton, et cetera. And I had a chip on my shoulder, and I obviously didn't mention it, but like, I think that drove me to work even harder, things like that. And so I think I think you actually have to develop one somehow. You have to figure out how. What are you almost self-conscious about? And that's going to drive you, you know?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it. And I know like Michael Jordan would talk about it. Like he'd find some way to be pissed at the competition.
Yeah.
As a way to motivate. I think Kobe did the same thing.
Yeah.
Being a basketball guy.
I am. Yeah. And I love that. And I love Jordan. And, I can find it easy to be, I mean, I always used to dog my competition and things like that. And, walk around the office and dog them and look at what these guys are doing. But again, the self-conscious stuff is, if you look at even narcissism, deep down, that's self-conscious. That's people are trying to make up for, ego problems, self-consciousness, self-esteem problems. So I think by coming up with something, I mean, you can be on paper, the smartest person in the world. So come up with something else. What are you trying to solve for and get passionate about it?
So talk a little bit about, you did a little bit, but, some of the people who've been important mentors to you and maybe how you found them and how you interacted with them over time.
Yeah, I mean, growing up and really, God, till this day, a guy named Tom Shannon, and he was the big guy in Tampa growing up. He was, the big developer, then he was one of the owners of Outback Steakhouse. And so he was just a well-known business guy. And I was just always humbly, but I was nipping at his knees and just always hitting him with questions, always this, always that. And I think he took a liking to me early on. And in different stages of my life, I've had different types of mentors. I remember when I moved to Atlanta, I lived in this townhome or this condo that I bought. The guy that lived in the penthouse was a divorced guy named Mark Cherry, and he was clearly successful. He'd gotten divorced recently and bought a condo in a penthouse in Midtown Atlanta, and was successful. And so I'd pick his brain. I ran into him in the gym and blah, blah, blah. And then I'd go up, around 5 o'clock a couple times a week and just pepper him with questions. When I started to get a little success, early on, two really wealthy, successful brothers named the Hanna brothers invested in my business, probably like 2011. And, part of, I think, their investment wasn't huge, but like one of the kind of one of the things I took it upon myself was at least once a month, I'd go and sit with one of the brothers and smoke a cigar with him. And it was like an unspoken rule. By the time the cigar was done, I was done.
Right.
But I would kind of think about it, 2 or 3 weeks before I'd go and jot down things I had questions about. And usually it was around financing and things like that. And he was really the first guy to say, there's a lot of good real estate people, but the difference between a successful real estate person and a really successful person is access to capital. Have your ass in New York City every 2 weeks. And I did, and I loved it. By the way, like I never really spent a lot of time in New York City, coming from Tampa, then Atlanta, and starting to live in New York, it was amazing. I'd stay at the Peninsula Hotel. I'd get great suits. I was learning, great food, great culture. I thought I was this tycoon.
Right.
And so then I'd come back to Atlanta and I'd kind of implement it. I was kind of, it was so motivating. And then, and so it was great advice. Kind of he's still a great mentor. But as I got, as I grew, I forget who it was, but they said, God, Pat, you kind of sucked the brains of your mentor. And I think as you go along, you outgrow people. And you got to continually look. I say it all the time. I want to be the brokest guy in the room. I want to be the least intelligent person in the room. And because, I'm kind of a sponge. And you just have to keep that level of humility, because the second you think you're on top, you'll get, at least me, you get knocked down. I want to be able to call, even if they're not in real estate, or even if I'm doing an investment they don't know everything about. Intelligent people have good instincts, and so hey, I'm looking at doing this investment in AI, or hey, I'm looking to do this venture capital investment. What do you think? And I get those questions all the time too. And I'll say, okay, well, that's not my experience or expertise, but what's the management team like?
Right.
What's their track record? Are they putting money in themselves? Things like that. And so I think, a good group of advisors that, really bring different specialties is so key, and wherever you're at in your career, you need that.
So now you clearly are, I don't know how formally, but mentor other people too. Do you find that you yourself directly benefit from mentoring others? I know that I do. I'm just curious what your experience is in terms of what you get from the mentorship, other than feeling good about paying it forward.
I think I do. I mean, I know I do. I mean, it's definitely pay it forward. It definitely feels good. But it reminds me how fortunate I am because, I can sense, how hungry these people are, how, they're just looking at, it's like looking at that wall right now. How the hell do I get through that wall? And how fortunate I am to have gotten to where I am. It's one in a million. It really is something that I am blessed about. But, talking to these guys, it reminds me like it's kind of where I'm at. It's like it's not easy to continually come up with good ideas. Neither of us is Elon Musk, right? And so I think it's, you have to constantly be looking for that opening. If one door closes, the real estate market freezes up because interest rates shoot through the roof. What is something that you can use the similar characteristics that made you successful and you can apply them to? And so like I had a call literally yesterday. It was a young guy that went to Florida State. You could feel him bursting through the phone, right? This kid would freaking, do a homicide if I wanted. And it was like, God, if I could just come up with the right idea to point this kid in the right direction, it would be great. So I think that reminds me of one, how fortunate I am, and two, we're all trying to figure it out. Yeah. And, talking to people and things like that, I think just reinforces, it keeps your mind sharp, it keeps your hunger sharp, and it reminds you, I think, why business is fun and also why it's hard.
Yeah. Now, can only imagine you've hired a lot of people over the years. How do you spot, reward, and grow talent? Like, what's your philosophy around that?
Hunger, for sure, hunger. I don't care if they went to Harvard or freaking Tallahassee Community College. Hunger, humility. Of course, they have to be intelligent, but I want somebody that's more than just somebody that wants to sit in the corner of the office and run spreadsheets. I want this person. I used to say I want jacks of all trades. So I want to be able to bring the person into a conference room, and I heard about Henry Ford one time, and he was on trial for something, and they were saying, Mr. Ford, what about this? What do you know about this? Nothing, but I have an employee that can.
Right.
What do you know about this? Well, nothing, but give me 20 minutes, I'll get one of my employees. And so it's kind of what I would do. I was like, I wanted to know a grasp on everything. I wanted to have a high level, but I wanted, like I used to say, paratroopers, people that could dive bomb in and really had those expertise. So, humility, I think, in the way that clearly they were smart, but they didn't act pompous. They weren't afraid to roll their sleeves up. Hunger to grow, right? Like they wanted to learn from me. They wanted to help grow the business. And I think humility, that, track record, but I didn't want to see somebody that jumped around 20 companies. Right. I wanted to see people that were relatively loyal. They'd been in a company, 4 or 5, whatever years. And now, they were just not excited about that company or something else. I didn't want to see somebody that had gone 4 or 5 different companies and now they wanted to go to another one.
Right.
That means they're either not good and they've been fired a lot, or they're just can't make their mind up. And so I think those are all things definitely more important to me than what college they went to.
Well, humility is an interesting one. You got to it way sooner than I did. I've only really had that concrete insight here in the last couple of years where it's now my number one criteria is humility. One, people with a huge ego and no humility don't generally play well with others, right? And if you think you're always the smartest guy in the room, you're emotionally invested in being right, you stop taking in new information.
Yeah.
Because you're emotionally invested in, not getting it wrong. And so I moved that. I would say that and hunger are sort of the two big ones for me too.
Yeah.
What about on the other side of it? What are the characteristics or traits when if you see them like, I got to cut ties, this isn't going to work out well?
Dishonesty. I mean, I remember I had a CFO who was so integral to my business, and we were growing like crazy. This was one of the hardest decisions I ever made. It was not like he was stealing money or anything, but it was really something that he did personally. And I remember I had him in the office. I already knew the answer to the question, and he lied to my face. And so I fired him right on the spot. It was a disaster. Everybody freaked out or whatever. So, but I just figured if he lied about that, he'd lie about other things.
Yeah.
And so dishonesty is a no-go. I think that's really, that's really the main thing. And I also hate people that don't respond to emails fast. Or you email them at 5:01 on a Friday and you get out of the office automatic response. That makes me want to puke.
Right.
So I think they have to be willing. I was always the guy that was, even as the owner of the company, I was willing to work just as hard as everybody else. I think you have to have that same cohesive balance, or else it builds resentment.
Well, so obviously you're not going to get to where you have without a healthy ego. Right? How do you keep yourself humble enough to be able to, play well with others, and and how do you think about humility and ego, and maybe not in employees, but in people you're doing deals with?
I mean, I think fear. I think I was always, even when things are going well. I mean, even now, I tell my financial advisor, I wake up and I feel like I'm broke. It takes me, 30 seconds or whatever to realize I'm in good shape. And, I think humility was just, look, no matter how good things are going, like Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Right.
And so I think I was just always afraid of what happens. And so, I read earlier on, or somebody told me, be nice to people on the way up because you may need them on the way down. And I think just also not believing I knew everything. And yeah, I had a healthy ego because I knew I'd done the work. Right. And a lot of people go to these fancy colleges and never crack a book again, never ask a question again. They figured they're this, like you said, the smartest guy in the room. And I knew that I was continually learning every single day. And, that brought confidence. And then, I think that was the thing. So the reason I hired humility is because I was humble, and so even though I'd walk into an office or conference room or whatever, and I'd look like maybe I had an ego, deep down I was scared, nervous, humble, because, I'd seen in 08, 09, these titans of industry get smoked, and so you just never know when that's going to happen.
Yeah. So went through a challenging divorce, as I understand it, single again. Kind of hazardous to your health in the Me Too movement. Like, what's it like being a wealthy guy and single? That's got to be challenging to navigate, I would imagine.
I mean, it's fun and it's challenging. Like you said, I think I read in the questions, do you have to have a team of lawyers? Hell yeah. I say I got lawyers watching lawyers. Because it's something in our culture that encourages people to sue.
Yeah.
And it's really scary. It's almost like when I had the company, if you fired someone, expect to get a wrongful termination. And, I always got the advice, hey, it's easier to settle than fight this out or whatever. And I was like, this is blackmail. This is like highway robbery. And so I think, especially like you mentioned with the Me Too movement and holy shit, um, you know, I, but I don't know if it was instinctual or whatever, but, for the past 15 years, I never would be alone in my office with a female.
Right.
I'd always have somebody else in the office, open door, whatever, just because it's so easy to get falsely accused, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm just also, I think, very nice. I always try to be a gentleman, and even if it doesn't work out, I try to be nice because I think if you're an asshole, you bring on problems. And but I really try to be thoughtful about who I date or who I hang out with. And yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, I tell people, I've been accused of a lot of things, but I've never been accused of that.
Right.
And yeah, it's a scary environment out there, though.
Now, you got 3 sons. Now they're still young, so not quite there yet, but they'll be there before you know it. Like, what advice are you going to give them?
Be a gentleman.
Right.
I mean, be a gentleman. I teach them hold the door, things like that. But a gentleman, I think, is a form of strength. Like it just is. And I think if you look back throughout history, the strong guys were the gentlemen, right? Like, even one of my favorite movies and shows is The Gentleman. So I just thought it was cool. I just always thought, if you had a lot of confidence, you could be a gentleman, right? You could also be a nice guy. You could be, you didn't have to thump your chest and tell everybody how badass you were.
Right. So now, it sounds like you're often in rooms with other guys who are even more successful than you, but there's probably a lot of times too when you're your most successful guy in the room. How do you navigate the fact that maybe a lot of people that want to be in your life have ulterior motives, hidden agendas? How do you navigate that?
Not very good a lot of times. I mean, I think I tell people I still feel like I'm a 15-year-old kid sometimes. And so, sometimes it takes a hard lesson to realize you're not. And you have to act as if you have a lot to lose. And so I think, unfortunately, you got to keep a very tight circle. You can't really go out and do things that other people can, because if you make a mistake, it's your ass. I mean, I went through a hard period, during the summer, and it was mental health related. And wow, it was like, I opened myself up to a lot of risk. And so I think just keeping a relatively low profile. I mean, even though, I think this day and age, you have to control the narrative on yourself. That's, why I do things like this.
Right.
But it's a blessing and a curse. You have to I think while you have to self-promote, while you have to control the narrative, you don't want to invite, jealousy and animosity. You want to be humble about it and things like that, because if you open yourself up, there's 50 people that are willing to come after you.
So do you have that inner circle of guys who are always going to be straight with you about, hey, look, you really need to dial that back, or hey, whatever?
I do now, and I have. I think I'm better at listening to them now. But I have for a while there, I lost that inner circle. I sold my business in the end of 2023. And with that went a lot of, my advisors, my lawyer, my banker, things like that I had for 15 years. And so just recently I've reestablished that. I have guys that are so successful that, huge venture capitalists, huge real estate guys, my financial advisor, right? Like multiple lawyers, well-known lawyers that, one even represents Elon Musk, right? And so he has such perspective that, and will tell me when I have shit in my teeth, right? Tell me when I'm, I'm off, tell me when I need to take a step back and, recalibrate. And when I have bad people in my life. I mean, I think that's the important advice, you have to get. Sometimes it's lonely. but you just can't invite that bad element in.
So I had relatively recently, I've had two pretty good friends of mine have some, one guy had a mid-8, one guy had a low 9-figure exit, something they've been driving towards for decades.
Yeah.
And in both cases, it was sort of derailing for both of them, and which it got me thinking a lot about money as a magnifier. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm curious about your opinion, having had a pretty big exit yourself pretty recently. How do you think about that, and how has that been for you?
I think it's true. I mean, I started, I'm fortunate that I've had success, I guess, for a while. But really, I'd say that the company sale, even though maybe it didn't change things significantly financially, I lost that structure.
Yeah.
I went from having 800 employees to none.
Right.
And I think it was a shock to my system a little bit. You lose that routine, you lose that structure. I mean, even now, it's like, okay, I have to force myself to, kind of think of things to do to keep that structure, and every morning for 20 years, I woke up and read the Wall Street Journal. I still do that. I still go work out with the trainer. I still try to take calls or meetings or, have lunch meetings and things like that. But it's definitely an adjustment. And I think, it can be a blessing and a curse. It's certainly a blessing. I think, it gives you a break mentally. And if you had told me when I was 35, I would be in the position financially where I am now, I'd probably say, okay, I'm going to move to Miami Beach and never do anything again
Right.
other than enjoy my life. I tell you, for the last 2 years, I'm bored out of my gourd. I'm definitely going to be active. I'm definitely going to, relaunch something, whether it's just a family office, and be active.
When's your non-compete run out?
The end of this year.
I bet you're counting the days.
Yes.
So, random question. You got a bunch of tattoos. The reason I ask is I only have one. When my daughter went off to college, I got a tattoo of a boomerang with her name in it.
That's
so
awesome.
right by my heart, so she could always come home to me. I'm curious what tattoo that you have that's the most meaningful to you.
I have a picture of my 3 sons on my heart.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Nice.
definitely that one. The rest, I think, I went through a phase and things like that. I love tattoos because it tells, your story. Like I always said, if I get hit by a bus,
Right.
it's you can kind of tell what kind of guy I am right away just by the tattoos I have and things like that. And I've really, like I said, I've gone through phases, throughout my life. I'd get several tattoos and then not get it, and then that whatever. And then so that's my most important tattoo.
So flash forward 30 years. Now your sons are 38 and 42, if I did the math right.
Yeah.
What would you want them to say about you?
I think what you said at the beginning of this podcast, you look for successful people with a moral compass. So hopefully they said, Dad is, ultra successful, but he also did it the right way. He was humble and kind, and, don't mess with him, he doesn't take lightly to that.
Because he's got that team of lawyers waiting.
Facts. But, I think, and he always learned, he was a consummate learner. I mean, some of the books I've always read, Ben Franklin, Warren Buffett, these guys learn every day. And so, hopefully my sons understand that life is about improving every single day. And, I just imagine, by the time I'm 80, if I apply that, where I'll be, but humble, kind, successful, and strong.
There's this thing called, I think it's called Gelman amnesia. It's named after some scientist named Gelman. And it's basically, I think he was a physicist, and whenever he would read an article about something he was an expert in, he would know it was all wrong, right? But then when he would read articles about any other topic, he would just assume it was right. Being somewhat of a public figure, and I'm sure you read a bunch of stuff that's, what's your experience with Gelman amnesia?
Unfortunately, most of them are right. I mean, I think, articles only tell the story that or get clicks and are entertaining, things like that.
Right.
You know, you don't really get the backstory. You don't really get, you know, you get like a snapshot.
Right.
And so I think, you know, in a way, those are you know, articles are meant to sell newspapers or magazines or, you know, internet subscriptions. You know, I've had my share of positive articles and negative articles. I don't necessarily worry about them because I do believe there's no such thing as bad publicity. And I think whenever there's something negative written about you, it lets you come back and control the narrative. And
Right.
so, you know, I think going back to what I said earlier about getting self-conscious about something, you know, I went through a hard period and there was some bad press on me. That gives me hunger to come back and fix that and, you know, correct the narrative. And because I'm not that person, I don't believe I'm that person. You know, you can take a snapshot of somebody, you know, if they trip on the sidewalk or whatever, you can say, okay, this is the most, you know, the clumsiest idiot in the world. Okay. But I think, you know, everybody needs something every once in a while to remind you that you're human,
Yeah.
to remind you that you're not perfect, and, you know, to motivate you. And I feel like I kind of needed that. Like I had so many wins and so many successes and things like that. Sometimes it's good to be brought back to earth.
It's like Trump. You were tired of winning.
I love Trump.
Me too. I'm a huge fan. Thank God he won.
For real.
So what do you? So a couple thoughts. One, I would imagine having some of the public stuff that happened with you, that in a way it could have been useful. Just my experience with people is if you want to know what they're really made of, if they're really in your corner, you need to see how they are when things go really, really well, and how things go really, really badly.
Right.
Really, really well, are they taking all the credit? When things go badly, are they there? And I'm guessing maybe you got to figure out if some people were really in your corner. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, it was. Unfortunately, nobody was in my corner. No, I mean, yeah, you do. You get to see. I think it's like when you go through a divorce, though. People don't want to get sucked into that, so I think everybody takes a step back.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean they're bad or good or whatever. And or maybe it's because I kind of take a step back. I like to fight my battles by myself, and I kind of tune everybody out. I think canvas the situation, and kind of look at how I want to respond to it. And I compete against myself, and so if I make a mistake, I take a step back and go, okay, is this actually a mistake? And if it is, I fix it, and, while I care what people think, just like everybody does, and if they say they don't, they're full of shit, I think. It's not my key driver. I know if I put my, best self out there, it's going to be a great outcome, and a lot of times I think, like I said, if everything's just going perfect, it's like if your company just prints money for 20 years and no speed bumps, you get complacent.
Yeah.
And so whether it's God or somebody puts things in your life that wakes you up a little bit and says, okay, you're not as perfect. You're not, you're still human. You need to continually, pay attention or things will get out of control. So yeah, I think, and, and I make it up to myself to re-engage first and foremost with the people that I know are real, that I know have my back regardless. And that's what I did and have done. And again, I just expect everybody else will fall in line. And when it's good or when it's clear, the wind's back behind your back, everybody's your friend again.
Everyone's a cheerleader then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So social media, good thing, bad thing, necessary evil? What do you think?
Necessary evil, for sure. I don't know one successful businessman that's not on it. I mean, I get all the time, why are you on it? You don't need this, blah, blah, blah. You have to, I mean, look, like you said, Me Too, this, that, whatever. You have to control the narrative, right? I want people seeing almost on a daily basis what I'm about, you know, even though it was, you know, I've publicly done bad things on social media. I want people to see now I'm doing good things. And I also look at it as a platform for mentorship, you know, that's my motivation. I'm not Grant Cardone looking to make money off it. I'm not looking to win a popularity contest. I really do feel like, damn, if I was in my early 20s, this would be something I'd want to hear.
Right.
And that's how I look at it.
Yeah. So you look like you're a healthy and fit guy into biohacking. You know, Dave Asprey and Brian Johnson and guys like that.
I just work out hard.
Okay.
I mean, I always have. I work out with a trainer 4 or 5 times a week. You know, I try to eat healthy. I mean, I think my metabolism as I get older slows down, so I have to adjust. But I think it's just working out hard. And, you know, that's what I do. I haven't really biohacked yet. I haven't really had, you know, I'm sure I will at some point. Right. But yeah, I think just working out hard, blowing off steam that way, and challenging, you know, like I am constantly challenging myself in a way, or coming up with things with my trainer going, okay, well, what are we going to do next? What's the next goal? And things like that.
So you made a lot of money, but you've also given a lot back. Tell me how you think about philanthropy, giving back, you know, helping other people. You know, I feel like service to others is the most, makes me feel better than just about anything else. I'm curious the lens you look at it through.
Yeah, I mean, one, I feel so blessed, and I've just always known if I hit a certain level, I was going to go give back. A lot of my charity efforts are based on underprivileged children. I've been on the board of the Boys and Girls Club for a long time, and that just hits home for me. I mean, you know, a lot of these, you know, children are dealt a bad hand. And so anyway, I feel like I can help in that regard. I think that kind of ties in with the entrepreneurship I really like. Other than that, I think, you know, something that I'm going to look heavily into is mental health. You know, I grew up in a way that, especially as a guy, mental health was kind of laughed at, like,
Right.
oh, suck it up, you know, like whatever. It's a real thing. Yeah. And so I think educating on that, making it less of a stigma, less of a, you know, unknown thing is important. You know, and especially like, you know, as I look at my sons and go, okay, I've had some struggles with mental health. It's likely one of the 3 of them are going to have it. Hopefully not, but probably. And I've also studied a lot about it. I mean, some of our most impressive minds throughout history have had struggles with mental health. Elon Musk, Winston Churchill, Einstein, you know, these guys all had mental health issues. Yeah. And they were, Steve Jobs, like they were able to significantly change our world. I mean, somebody told me, you know, if it weren't for bipolar people, our world would not be where it is. They're the ones that are wild enough to run out there and fight armies. They're the ones that are up for 3 days strategizing. They're the ones that really have a lot of creative instincts that, you know, frankly, other people don't. But they also deal with a lot of the bad too. You know, it's you can be the wealthiest, most successful person in the world and get whacked with depression, and it feels like it comes out of nowhere. You know, whereas when I was 20-something years old, and somebody tells me they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and they have this great life, and they said I'm depressed, I'd say, what the fuck? What is wrong with you?
Right.
You know, give me your problems.
Well, I remember reading something years ago that all genius is actually a form of organic brain damage. That the brain creates alternative synaptical pathways around the damage, if you will. That's why maybe someone who's a savant can, you know, divide 12-digit numbers, but, you know, has no social skills, whatever it might be. And I think there's something to that. I have an older brother who's got like some 165 IQ. Strange guy. Super nice, but, you know, but yeah, it's interesting.
I believe it.
So you went to a Catholic high school. I think you're still on the board of directors there. Are you a religious guy?
Yeah. I mean, I don't go to church every Sunday, unfortunately. But yeah, I am.
If you had to pick between these three, contentment, happiness, or purpose, which would you choose?
Contentment.
Yeah? Well, tell me a little bit why.
Yeah, I mean, I think, contentment is something that I think everybody strives for. I think, hopefully my I'm not content yet. Hopefully my idea of contentment is, 20 years from now. I think once you have contentment, you're content and you're not as hungry anymore and things like that. But I just think that to me feels like peace of mind.
Peace is a wonderful thing, feeling comfortable in your own skin. There was something you said in one of your interviews that I've never heard someone say before, and it really struck me, and I wanted to ask you about it, which was that you basically became the guy you wanted to be when you were in high school.
Yeah.
Never heard someone say that before. Usually what they thought they wanted to be ended up being something completely different.
Yeah.
So, if, given that it turned out that way, if you could go back in a time machine and talk to your 15-year-old self, would there be any advice you'd give yourself about maybe, even though it turned out kind of how you wanted it to?
Avoid divorce.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would tell myself, as scared as you're going to be, keep pushing forward, right? Like, the people that win are the people that do the preparation, but also don't have fear.
Right.
You have to be willing to take that leap of faith. You have to be willing to, not be intimidated. When I was building my business, I was going up against companies that were so much larger than us, so much more established, so much better capitalized, and I didn't care. I mean, I was going to fight, and I loved that. And so I think having that lack of fear is something that I would resonate. But I think also, seeing who you want to become, and I think that was key. I think I'm trying to figure out now who I want to become the next 20 years.
We do get to reinvent ourselves a bunch of times if we want to.
Yeah.
So, it's unlike you, I did go to some good schools, and I can tell you that it was almost a complete fucking waste. You'd run circles around almost all the guys I went to work with, wouldn't even be close. And in fact, I almost begged my daughter not to go to college. Because, nowadays, like if I were born today, I would have never gone to college. I'd be starting businesses in middle school.
Yeah.
And my daughter did go to college. It worked out fine for her. But I'm curious the advice you're going to give your sons when that time comes around for them.
I think I'll be able to tell if they need it. They need the structure. They need, that or whatever, or they don't. I think entrepreneurs inherently don't need it. They're going to figure out how to make it work. They're the ones that, can think on their feet. They're the ones that have passion. They're the ones that, are going to figure out a way to connect the dots. And, others, there's a saying, there's hunters and there's gatherers. And, if one of my sons is a hunter, the worst thing I could do is probably stick him in a college classroom for 4 years. But I'm sure their mother will have a different opinion and things like that. College I always thought of is definitely an added thing. I mean, having a degree and things like that is respectable, and, certainly learning for 4 years is a good thing. But God, more and more of the things I hear, like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, they all just bash college. And if you're going to sit back and throw everything in AI and ChatGPT and just go out and party your face off for 4 years, I think it's
No
bullshit.
one writes a paper anymore. Like, that's not a thing. Like,
It's
there's
not
no one
a-
writing a paper.
It's not a thing. ChatGPT is the coolest thing ever.
It really is. Well, even before you said anything, I knew you were in Kamala 2024. I'm curious, now that, yesterday was a big day, obviously. How do you feel about financial markets, real estate markets, and kind of, I'm just curious what your opinions are reading of the tea leaves in terms of now that Trump's back in office.
I'm long. I mean, I think Trump is making so many moves. I wish I could predict interest rates. I don't know if he can influence that, but he's going to make America the most powerful country again. I mean, we are the most powerful country, but we have had a lot of stupid mistakes, self-inflicted wounds.
Super.
I think he's going to go back and create a lot of those things. I actually am lucky enough to know some of the guys he's surrounded himself with. They're all super successful guys, not lifetime politicians. One of the things I love that Trump said is he's going to bring common sense back. And I think, things are going to boom. American-made things are going to boom. There's energy's going to boom. Infrastructure's going to boom, right? Like all this AI stuff needs infrastructure. He is going to lay the groundwork for that. I think, technology things, anything Elon Musk touches is going to kick ass. So I think I'm very bullish in what he's going to do.
So just in wrapping up, we covered a lot of territory, and honestly, really can't tell you how much I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Some real pearls of wisdom here that I think people can really benefit from. Any one or two last nuggets, things maybe I didn't think to ask that you think people in their 20s and 30s, maybe kids where your sons are going to be in a decade or two could benefit from?
No one has clarity. You know what I'm saying? Like as entrepreneurs, no one has this clarity of vision, especially when they're starting out. It's just as tricky and just as challenging and just as frustrating. I mean, I remember just being so frustrated going, how am I going to figure this out? How am I going to da-da-da? I have that now. Like finding good ideas is tough. Finding capital is tough. Finding good employees is tough. I think knowing that and knowing that even the most seasoned entrepreneurs, once they have a successful exit and they're back to the drawing board, it's not easy, and also even if somebody's had a lot of success doesn't mean they're content or happy or whatever. I think, and I'm guilty of this, you get to a point where you start comparing yourself or, getting jealous or whatever. That's stupid, and by the way, once you have enough money, like a couple more zeros don't mean anything, and so I think just, doing the right thing, doing good business that makes sense, the money will take care of itself.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, is there, you're involved in a bunch of charities, you've got your socials, anything you want to plug by all means, like where can people find you? And maybe what are the things you're excited about that you'd love people to be involved in?
Yeah, Patrick Carroll is my Instagram name, just my name spelled out. And yeah, for sure. I mean, look, give to the Boys and Girls Club, give to, give back. But yeah, I don't really have anything to plug. I don't have a tequila line. I'm not selling books, things like that. No, just keep learning.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you again for your time, Patrick.
Yes,
I really
sir.
appreciate it.
Yeah.